Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available, too, at carolthecoach.com.
Now, I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
Hi there. I am Carol Jurgens-Chief, and this is Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And I got to tell you, I'm on vacation. I'm at my lake place. I've got a whole host of women. This is the 18th annual Girls Week at the lake. But I did not want to give up this spot because tonight I'm going to be interviewing Drs. Bill and Ginger Bercaw, and they have been instrumental in the field of sexuality in general, but especially they are amazing because they have written 2 different books, one for people that have had trauma in their life, and it's affected their sexuality, and they have to rebuild the trust. They have to get past the betrayal, and they have to learn how to move on. And so they wrote a book, and I interviewed them last year, an amazing, amazing book on how to work through your issues. And this year, they published another book it's called From the Living Room to the Bedroom, The Modern Couple's Guide to Sexual Abundance and Lasting Intimacy. And as I read this book, what I realized is that this book is for anybody. This book is if you've gotten too busy, you've put your sexuality, your relationship on the back burner, and, you have developed that schedule that is so busy that sex comes last, your relationship comes last, and you're really trying to catch up with life. You know when you're crazy busy and technology has bombarded you and you're wearing multiple hats and there are a list of intimacy obstacles that you face. So whether you're an addict, a partner, or you just happen to stumble on the show tonight, I've got to tell you, Drs. Bill and Ginger Bercaw are co-founders of the California Center for Healing out of Pasadena, California. And they have made it their mission to help couples to improve their relationship. And it's not just in the bedroom. It's with communication, all the other stuff that you need to do to have a healthy relationship. So I'm going to be excited to be interviewing them tonight. And, I'm just hoping that all this works out because I'm not in my studio. I'm actually at the lake place. I'm doing this impromptu. So please bear with me if anything falters. For instance, I don't even have wireless here. So I'm using my hotspot from my iPhone. And so we're just going to wing it. And I hopefully will have a great show tonight. But if there's something that occurs, I just want you to know I was that determined to be with you. And you know I'm the only certified sexual addictions therapist in Indianapolis. I know I have listeners all over the world. If you need a certified sexual addictions therapist, you need to go to www.sexhelp.com, put in your country, put in your zip code, and you will find the closest certified sexual addictions therapist in your area. And I highly recommend this because it's such a specialized field. There is no doubt that it is imperative when you're dealing with sexual addiction that you get people that are actually trained in the field. Now tonight, before Bill and Ginger come on, I wanted to talk to you about how do you build trust in your relationship with a partner, whether you're a male or female. Oftentimes, I tell my clients, it's not just your talk, because unfortunately, your talk has gotten you into this problem. You've told your wife or husband that you're not looking at internet porn. You've sworn off prostitutes, multiple affairs, chat rooms, Craigslist. You've told him or her a million times that you're done with it. And truly, by the time somebody can say, I'm an addict, they have betrayed their partner in communication multiple times. And so you may be wondering, what do I do to rebuild my relationship and show him or her that I am really on track this time and I really mean what I said? And I always say it's not just walking your talk, it's walking the walk. And that means that that it's imperative that you do a variety of things. And I've had several people email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com, and they've asked, what are the recovery tools? What do I do? How can I prove to my spouse that this time it's different? Well, whether you're single and you don't have a spouse, or you are in a coupleship and you want to do it differently this time, the beautiful thing about what I'm going to talk to you about is that not only does it help your own recovery, but it shows your partner that you mean business. And that's what I do when I'm talking to partners. And they say, I don't know whether to trust again. I don't know whether I can let my guard down and believe that he or she is really working the steps. I say, okay, what I want you to do is to work on a recovery points worksheet weekly. And that means that what you need to do is you need to work on your recovery, your spirituality, your mental, your psychological, and your physical self. And so I have a worksheet available. I would be more than happy to send it to you, but you got to email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com. And this weekly worksheet is something that I oftentimes encourage my coupleship to review once a week. And it looks like this. The worksheet actually has recovery activities. And alongside of each activity is a point system. For instance, if you have a date night with your spouse, that's a point because you're making your spouse a priority. If you go to a 12-step meeting, you get 7 points. If you go to group therapy, you get 5 points. If you exercise, you get 2 points. If you read recovery-related materials, you get 1 point. And you really work on attempting most of these things daily. And then you add up your points, and you and your spouse decide how many points does it take to not only have good recovery, but also to build that foundation of trust with your spouse. So you get to make the decision. If you want to know what I believe, I'm not going to share that over the air. You can email me, and I'll give you what I feel you need to be doing, because it's all customized to your own issues. The sheet. You put how many points you've earned. You do it 7 days a week, and then you share it with your spouse. And what I assure the spouse is that when they do that, when they work diligently on their recovery, that is the way to rebuild trust. Because recovery is easy and it's tough. When you first start out, I have to admit, most of my clients say, oh, it feels so laborious. Who wants to go to 90 meetings in 90 days? Or who wants to get up early to do the recovery reading, the prayer that may be involved, and the meditation, the journaling, and then exercise? But I tell you, I can speak for myself in that I have not missed a day of exercising in 30 years. And it's not so much what it does for my body, which it does. It does incredible things to my body. It keeps me fit. It makes me strong. But more than that, it gives me a mental alertness and discipline where I walk around every day going, I really did something that worked for me, my mental health, and my body. And so I'm so proud of that. I look forward to that exercise. And I've said it before, I get up at 5 a.m. every morning so that I can do some inspirational reading, recovery reading, and then I do exercise, and on my iPod I listen to more inspirational stuff. So by the time I'm at work at 8 o'clock, I have worked out, I have listened to inspirational recovery or spiritual material, I've read, and I played with my puppy. You know, my husband's sleeping. He's not a morning person, so this is when I choose to do my work. And I feel so good about myself, and that's what I want to pass on to you. When you work it, it works. And you get into the routine. You may fake it till you make it. You may go, okay, I'm going to do this because I know it's good for me. I don't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, one day, you get up itching to get that exercise in, devouring, whether it be a paragraph, a page, or a chapter of recovery or spiritual information. It fills your soul. And that's what I promised how to do it. And oftentimes, you have to have a good sponsor to help hold you accountable. You need to share that with your spouse. You need to have a good therapist, and perhaps share it in individual or group work. You know, your group attendees, you know, your fellows or women in group will admire you for getting this done, and they'll encourage you when you aren't feeling it that day. So clearly, set up some structure that works for you, and when you do the work, it truly works. And again, if you want to email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com, I will send you this Recovery Points worksheet. You do it weekly, you share it with your spouse, you build trust. Now, the other thing I want to share real quick, I'm kind of excited. Oh, I am absolutely excited, is that I have a new website. Many of you have seen my carolthecoach.com website, and that's about me, that's about my therapy, that's about my radio shows, that's about my columns, that's about my life coaching. But I have a wonderful website called Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and I want you to visit that. And I want you to read what my clients have written and look at much of the bibliotherapy that I recommend. I want you to find out about me, and I want you to email me if you have any questions at all. I am your personal life coach and your psychotherapist that's here to help you through this difficulty that feels like a burden and an obstacle right now, but will be the greatest gift that's ever been given to you, because you will be working towards being the best person you can ever be when you're in full-fledged recovery. Now, if you have a question tonight, you can give me a call at 646-595-3284. And again, I'm going to be talking with Dr. Bill and Dr. Ginger Bercaw, and they've written this new book called From the Living Room to the Bedroom, The Modern Couple's Guide to Sexual Abundance and Lasting Intimacy. And it is amazing. They have something called the CoupleFlow, which is a model that's allowed hundreds of couples to overcome the ever-growing list of intimacy obstacles the modern couples face. And in the book, you'll find a clear plan designed to just help you with creating a shared vision for your ideal relationship. You know, John Gottman, the father of marital therapy, the only long-term researcher on marital therapy, said one of the things you need to do is you need to have a vision with your partner. And I know that may be very tough for you. Clearly, when there's been a lot of betrayal, it's hard to think about a vision, but it's important to have one of those. And we all have rough spots in our relationships. But here's what I believe. Conflict breeds intimacy. So when you work diligently on sharing your feelings and you work on the tool of being honest and open with your partner, even if it's conflictual, I guarantee you it will make a difference in the intimacy that you feel. And what I mean by that is that, you know, in a healthy relationship, when you really talk with people about, well, when you talk with your partner about things that are upsetting or bothersome, it may feel conflictual at first, but then what ends up happening is that you absolutely feel closer. And that's what conflict does. When you share that with your spouse, you end up feeling closer. And in healthy relationships, if things aren't quite so healthy, that may be the time that you get involved in marital therapy. You know, I really believe you start out individually, but then when your therapist says it's a go, you get into good marital therapy, because obviously sexual addiction is a trauma that you've experienced, and it requires the help of experts in the field. So I'm very excited tonight to be interviewing two experts, Drs. Bill and Ginger Bercaw. Welcome to the Sex Help with Carol the Coach show. How are you?
We're great.
Hey,
Thank you so much, Carol. It's great to join you this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having us on again.
Well, thank you so much, because this book is for anybody. I mean, every couple I know can use this book. So I'm curious, what made you decide to write this book specifically, From the Living Room to the Bedroom?
Well, you know, I think the main thing is just recognizing the times that we're living in right now. We see it in our practice day in and day out, how our culture, I think, is really doing a number on marriages. Everybody is spread so thin, and we also realized that we knew firsthand how easy it was to just kind of let the flow of modern life pull us apart and create distance, sometimes in ways that are subtle, sometimes in ways that were more pronounced. So we also recognized that we knew some things, you know, based on our professional work as well as our personal experience, and we really set out to come up with a book that we would read, something that was very informative, something that was well-grounded in research and theory, but something that ultimately was very usable. So that's what we came out with, From the Living Room to the Bedroom.
Well, and I love the title because, you know, you're talking about what you need to do in the living room as well as in the bedroom. So what's so important about that connection between that part of the house and the bedroom?
That's a great question. And, you know, we could have just called our book The Bedroom, but we know that in order for couples to really feel good about their sex life, they need to have a deep emotional connection to keep the path to the bedroom warm. And so that's why we spend so much time in our book discussing the living room, or that emotional connection. So while almost everyone is interested in a better sex life, we need to be careful not to compartmentalize the bedroom. So turning up the temperature in the living room really creates a nice warm path to the bedroom, helping you to experience your sexual times together in an even more connecting way that keeps you coming back for more.
Well, and you know, I always recommend your book, The Couple's Guide to Intimacy, How Sexual Reintegration Therapy Can Help Your Relationship Heal. And one of the things in that book is about how you don't have to jump into the bedroom, that really there's a lot of things that you have to do that are almost foreplay for having that deep, meaningful relationship in the bedroom. And I have to tell you, my clients go, oh, my goodness, you know, when there's been trauma and sexual addiction, you really encourage couples to go very, very slow and to do the exercises and work on building that foundation. And I saw a lot of that even in this book, you know, all the things that you need to do. So could you share a couple of exercises that you encourage couples to do when maybe they've detached from each other, they've let the busyness of life get in their way, and they put sex on the back burner and maybe are only having sex once a week, once a month, or even once a year?
Right.
Yeah. Carol, I think one of the sources of frustration that couples have, even when they're like-minded and they recognize, yeah, we do have a problem, or we do want to be doing better, getting beyond where we're at right now, if they just kind of look around at what's available, some of the more kind of pop psych offerings that are out there, they all start in the bedroom. They're all kind of gimmicky. I mean, I shouldn't say all, but there's a lot of kind of gimmicky, quick fix stuff out there. So our model, as you've mentioned, it doesn't start in the bedroom, although certainly as you go a little bit further along in the model, you get into a lot of sensual and eventually sexual exercises. But we know that in order for any sexual improvements to really stick, they have to be grounded in intimacy. That's what all couples are really looking for, a passionate, deeply satisfying sex life in the context of a really richly connected emotional relationship. So, for example, what we have couples do right off the bat is ask a very basic question. What's it like being married to me? And we do that because, oftentimes when couples do recognize they're not doing as well as they'd like to, they're certainly more naturally aware of how their partner isn't more in line with the way they'd like them to be. So we basically have them take their own inventory. What must it be like in relationship with me? First, we ask the question in a non-sexual way, and then a little bit later on in the program, we ask the same question, except specifically, what is it like in the bedroom with me?
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful exercise. And to clarify for the listeners, initially you ask the person to imagine what it's like being married to you, and then you ask them to communicate that and ask their partner.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And we kind of do it in a way that plays off of the typical marriage vows. We ask them to make a list under the heading for better, and then another one under the heading for worse. So not just looking at the negative aspects that they bring to the relationship when asking that question, what must it be like, but also what are the positive qualities I bring? Because as you know, many people come into the relationship with a self-esteem deficit. They're not really connected with the attributes, the positives that they're bringing to the relationship, and they act that out in relationship with each other, and it doesn't work.
Oh, no kidding. Well, that's a wonderful example of how through communication, when you get to deal with that with your partner, I would suspect that you get extra insight into what does that partner like about you, for better or for worse, and then what might they want to see improved. And so that's that conflict thing that I was talking about earlier in the show, that in a healthy relationship, or at least in a safe setting, hearing the good And some of the needs improvement can help you to determine what is it that I need to change to be there for my partner, as well as to be feeling better about what I can give in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the main point of that exercise, just like any of the communication exercises, is to really open up a field of communication. So as you were saying, in the back and forth, that's really where it's at. It's, the writing down, the inventory taking, that's great. But then when you actually talk about it and you're able to own your stuff and you're able to hear your partner say, yeah, I appreciate that. I never knew you were aware of that. Mm-hmm. Or on the flip side, it was good to hear you say that, that you feel good about, organizing things for us, because I'm not good at that, and I don't know, how our family would function if you weren't so organized. So, you see that play out, and you realize couples are now talking about something. They're having a conversation that they wouldn't ordinarily have, and it's at a depth that they wouldn't necessarily get to either.
So now let me ask you a very personal question, because I know you've done a lot of research on this. Do you feel that men are as invested in this kind of dialogue as women are?
I'll take this one, being the man here. Women. The bottom line is women don't have the market cornered on valuing emotional intimacy. In fact, I've worked with a lot of men who have told me that if the living room doesn't feel right to them, they're not going to be up for the bedroom either. And that really goes against gender stereotypes. But it's very true, and I think probably more and more for us modern men, as more is being asked of us, from one generation to the next, emotionally, I think that men are gradually catching up to women in terms of really valuing that emotional connection.
And what do you think, Ginger?
I think so too, Carol. I think, maybe initially when if couples are starting in therapy together or even sitting down to read this book, I still think some stereotypes do apply. And I think sometimes until these, concepts are introduced to men in a way that is non-threatening and where they can actually see the value of it, they may not realize, what they're missing until they're experiencing it in a really safe, nurturing context. And so that's really our hope in presenting it and the way that we've laid it out, is that it will feel safe for men and women to really be embarking on this journey of, greater emotional connection as well as greater sexual satisfaction.
I got to tell you something. I referenced John Gottman earlier because he really is an amazing researcher, and he has a series of questions in his book. What is it? The 7 Principles of a Successful Marriage, or something like that. And I take those kind of books with me when I am in the car and my husband and I are doing road trips, because he's captivated and captured. And I just say, just answer 5 of these for me. And so I'll just throw them out. And although he may roll his eyes, as if, do we have to do this stuff, he really gets into that, understands me better, and obviously, more importantly for me, I end up finding out what his thoughts are. And sometimes I'm just dead wrong. And I'm always amazed because I think I read people really well, but our partners, we don't always know what they're thinking, and we don't always have the market on their thoughts or their beliefs. And checking in with them is so healthy, closer, and that's what you're talking about, intimacy. And we all know that sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder. And so I know you're working with normal couples, but I'm kind of curious, how does your work with couples in sexual recovery differ from non-recovering couples?
Well, before we get to that, I want to get back to one thing there, Carol.
Okay.
And when you're in the car there with your husband, you're making
doing the road trips.
Yep, that's right. You're making it easy for him. And I think that so many men really crave more emotional connection, or at least want to satisfy their wives' expressed desires for more emotional connection, but they're unsure how to do it. So I really don't think that most men are insensitive to their partner's intimacy needs. I know many of our recovering sex addicts are starting a little bit, further behind. But I think so many men, recovering and non-recovering, they feel confused or frustrated about what that consistently winning emotional connection formula looks like. So, I think any time that you can basically, roll out, kind of light up the runway and say, here's what it is, here's what I would like right now. Let's talk about this topic. Mm-hmm. You're not putting it all on him, because I think where a lot of couples get into trouble and they kind of get in this, endless, downward spiral. He hears from her over and over again. You just don't know how to connect with me. You don't really know how to emotionally give me what I need. And he's thinking, no, I don't. And I'd really like some help with this. So what a great example there of your road trip in mm-hmm. how to come alongside your husband in a non-threatening way, mm-hmm. And to make it easy for him.
Well, thank you so much. And I've got to tell you, certainly my husband gets the question all the time about what's it like being married to a therapist, and does she therapize you to death? And he will be the first to admit, no, I wouldn't even know she was a therapist. If she does not present herself in that way. I think I'm like every partner that really does crave lying closeness with my spouse. And the good news is I get to read books all the time that help me with that. And that's why your book is so instrumental. From the living room to the bedroom, the modern couple's guide to sexual abundance and lasting intimacy. And I got to tell you, I'm talking with Dr. and Ginger Bercaw, and you really do have the market on sexual recovery and sexuality. And guys, when I read this book, I said, oh my goodness, they are just moving into everybody's territory now. I mean, this is not just for sexual recovery. It is for any couple who desires being closer, having more intimacy inside and outside of the bedroom. So I really appreciate the fact that you've written this book. It is so easy to read, and the exercises are so valuable. So I want to thank you there.
Oh, great. Well, thanks you,
Carol.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you. That really means a lot coming from you.
It really does.
So you had asked a question before about, the differences in working with recovering and non-recovering couples.
Right.
And I think it all ties in here, because I think, again, part of the motivation for this book is Ginger and I realized that as we did, I'd say our practice is probably, pretty, maybe it skews a little bit towards working a little bit more with recovering couples.
Yeah.
But we do a fair amount of work with both. And what we realized was, as much as we were focused on our couples in sexual recovery, we realized all couples really are going for the same finish line. Mm-hmm. We all want to be, to have that deep emotional connection and that sexual satisfaction. The starting line's different. So when we're working with the couples in sexual recovery, we're starting, we're a little bit further back, and with the non-recovering couples, it's a little bit further ahead. But we're all going for the same thing.
Mhm. Mhm. And Ginger, you would agree with that?
Absolutely. That was, I think, part of what made our second book, easy and fun for us, too, is because, we realized, just like Bill was saying, that, at the very foundation, all couples want the same thing. But when we start working with couples in sexual addiction recovery, they just have a much different starting line, and typically, they've had a huge implosion at their home. We really have to get in there and, stop the acting out and help the spouse deal with his or her trauma. And, the difference with just, non-addictive couples is typically they don't have the same extent of emotional and relationship damage, or it might have been more of kind of a slow burn of resentment over years. So we're really dealing with a different starting line, but we're absolutely going to the same finish line of just wanting to feel safe and connected and respected, and to bring as much fun and joy in the living room and the bedroom.
Well, and here's what I believe, that certainly people who are more prone to developing sexual addiction may have had some emotional trauma as a child that they are reenacting as adults, and that plays itself out in the partnership, and therein lies the betrayal and the mistrust and all that stuff. But truly, when I interview normal, healthy individuals, they too have had trauma in their childhood. I mean, whether they've been in an alcoholic home, a drug addict home, whether they've come from divorce, everybody's had some sort of trauma that they've had to deal with that may affect their ability to be close and have that emotional or sexual intimacy. So I'm sure our recovering folks do come from a different starting point, but in some ways, when they've hit rock bottom, they're more motivated than the average couple to get it right, because they know they've got to rebuild if they're ever going to have the life that they deserve and their partner deserves. So I can really appreciate the fact that recovering folks are different, but we all need this stuff. And you two have been married how long?
It'll be 16 years in August.
Well, congratulations. My goodness. Now, you talked about several different models, and certainly CoupleFlow is a model that you have termed and coined that allows couples to get past the intimacy and to develop greater closeness. Can you tell us a little bit about what CoupleFlow is? Because I want everybody to get this book, and I want everyone to use your model.
Oh, thank you, Carol. Well, CoupleFlow is really the very foundation of this book, and it's based on the premise that what happens in the living room really affects what ends up happening in the bedroom. So when you have that nice, warm connection in the living room, it naturally, leads the way to a more fun, relaxed, passionate bedroom, and then that energy from the bedroom carries right back into the living room again. So it's really a very positive feedback loop. Now, on the flip side, we have what we call couple drift, and that's what happens when couples, do not have that positive energy, and they're really lacking in that renewable energy. And, it's what we see happening in our society all the time when we're spread in a million different directions. Couples, when they're not intentional in the living room and the bedroom, they end up drifting apart from each other.
Okay. Now, I know there's a section in the book, it's actually in step 1 of the book, the Protect to Connect chapter, where you discuss what you call the kids menu and the adults menu. Can you tell us a little bit about these menus, what they consist of, and, how couples can use them to improve their intimacy?
Yeah, absolutely. Little background. We were asked to give a talk at a treatment center a while ago, and they ended up picking the title for us, and it was called Effective Fighting for Couples. And Ginger and I weren't thrilled with it, but we went with it. They had already had the marketing materials made up. So, we got to talking about the title and kind of breaking it down as a couple of psychologists will. What don't you really like about it? So we started talking about fighting and, who are, as a class, the best fighters that we know of. And we came up with kids. Kids, will do whatever it takes to win. That is their sole goal in any conflict. So they will try and form alliances. They will bring in outside sources. They will call names. They'll bait each other. If things aren't going their way, they'll take their ball and go home. So the idea is that there is a child in every one of us that is more than willing to step up and basically fight our battles for us. So on that kids menu, when we let that young, scared, vulnerable, shameful sometimes part of us run the show, it's a very limited menu that we're choosing from. It basically consists of avoiding, attacking, defending, or enmeshing, none of which are great options, any of which will lead to a negative interaction and outcome. So one of the concepts that you were referring to in that Protect to Connect chapter is really identifying what does it look like for each of us when we are on the kids menu. How do we typically avoid? How do we typically attack or get into defensive kinds of maneuverings or enmesh with our partners? And what would it look like when we're, to be on the adults menu? What are we striving for when we pull ourselves back into the truth of the moment and the truth of who we are? What does that look like, and what can we do? And we see a menu over there on the adult side that is much more varied, and anything on it is something that you can say yes to. For example, sharing your truth moderately, not trying to blow someone out of the water, not withholding it. Listening respectfully, not listening to try and poke holes in somebody's position, but really genuinely wanting to know, where is my partner at on this? Taking responsibility for our feelings. So learning not to think, hey, you're making me feel nervous about this or guilty about this. Owning our feelings and learning how to express them moderately. Even asking directly.
Bill?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Continue. Because I was going to say, I was just going to say, you said owning your feelings. I find that it can be tough for people to even identify how they're feeling because they're so flooded with that. And so this chapter really helps them to identify primary feelings.
Yeah, we have a short list there. I always joke that it's really for us men, who have a hard time identifying much beyond anger, at least stereotypically. But yeah, we look at love, passion, joy, and then fear, anger, shame, guilt, and pain. And it's certainly there are sub emotions that fall under any of those. But yes, just slowing down enough to think, what is it that I'm actually feeling in response to what's happening right now, and owning it. Because again, so many times the way that when you're on the child's menu, a typical flow of thoughts would be, she's making me feel guilty. Okay, I need her to do X, Y, and Z so that I'm not feeling guilty anymore. All right, so I've just totally lost connection with my power as soon as I start thinking what I need from her in order to feel better. So if I own it, though, and I think, okay, well, I am having some guilt about this, I might then take another step into the solution. Well, what is it that I want to do about this guilt? Or maybe a step into understanding, where is it coming from? That's a much different path than, if she doesn't do X, Y, Z, or I need her to do X, Y, and Z.
Well, that's exactly what I was talking about. I find that men have more difficulty with identifying feelings in general because they haven't been socialized and given permission to do that. So owning their feelings and really identifying what they are really helps, as well as women tend to get so flooded with feelings that it's oftentimes hard for them to pick the primary one. And that's why I love this adult menu, because it really kind of breaks things down and gives the power back to each one individually so that they can communicate and negotiate and compromise and do all those things that you talk about under the adults menu.
Right, so they can actually be partners with each other.
That's right.
Yeah.
We had a situation a couple nights ago, actually, where I had an experience that we were out in a public setting and something happened. Don't need to get into the details. But Ginger was there, and she saw everything, and afterwards she said, how was that for you? And I said, after I slowed down and kind of took my own inventory quickly, I said, I got to tell you, I had some shame and I had some fear, in the moments after it happened. And then I kind of walked her through where I went from there. But just that moment of awareness, I recognized how different that felt from years gone by, where I would maybe not have even known, I don't know, it was fine, or it was okay, something like that. And it still feels, I think, like such a victory. And, you can almost feel that moment of connection where you're able to say, no, this is what it was. It was actually fear in that moment. It was actually shame in that moment. And I think Ginger appreciated it too.
I did, yeah. Yeah, well, I think when you can identify your feelings, it really helps you to drive the bus more than have your feelings take over. So, I think that's why, a little bit earlier in the book, we do talk about boundaries as well and how important it is to have good internal boundaries so that when you are sharing things, it doesn't come out, where you're either flooding the other person or withholding either, but not that you're going to communicate perfectly all the time. But when you are centered and you are able to pause for a minute and share your experience, it just makes it so much more possible to connect as well as feel empathy for your partner when they're able to share their feelings. And, that's really foundational for that emotional intimacy.
Well, I know under the adults menu, one of the first bullet points you have is use boundaries for protection and connection, which I love. And then the last one is also another boundary, which is to appreciate and accept when your partner says no about. And
right.
I just really admire when someone faces their fear head on and is truthful and does that in a very respectful way. And couples are kind of afraid to do that, especially in recovery. When you have a partner who's in the doghouse, so to speak, they are the ones that have betrayed their partner, and they're afraid to say no because they feel like they have to make up for all the injustices that they caused in the past. And that can be so difficult because truly in healthy relationships, we should be able to share our boundaries no matter what and then figure out some way to have them respected, even if that ends up being some compromise and negotiation.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you're referring to there, it's something that a lot of recovering sex addicts run into in early recovery. It is a bit of an altered universe, where I think the normal rules don't necessarily apply. During the immediate aftershock of being found out or doing a formal disclosure, where some really painful stuff comes out, they're not in the best position to really, maybe be as assertive as they otherwise would be. But I think the challenge is, and I've heard many men ask this, it's a topic in our men's group sometime, when do I get to actually have a voice again? So much it's a matter of timing, I think, and kind of gradually, having the recovering addict's voice come back to a position of equality. It can't happen immediately, and certainly depending on the circumstances, it can take a little bit longer.
Well, you got it, and I just recommended this book to a couple that I'm working with because he has gone for 45 days, and he is following recovery, perfectly. I mean, he is doing everything he is supposed to have done, and he had a history of going to massage parlors and sexual acting out through Craigslist, but he's wanting to jump right into sex now. And he's like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. I'm really making this work for me and for you, but I am craving that closeness. So how would you handle that? Because it is difficult for addicts who are recovering, especially in early recovery, to not get discouraged when their partner won't jump right back into the bedroom.
Yeah. He's 45 days, you said?
Yep, 45 days. Doing it perfectly, but obviously there's lots and lots of betrayal.
Yep, keep putting those months together. Keep doing what he's doing, and give his partner plenty of room to be wherever she's at. And I think, spouses and partners 45 days into recovery, it's hard to imagine what her world is like right now and how available she's feeling sexually. We do see some partners become more sexual, in that early recovery period. and for different reasons. Many times they're trying to overcompensate for what they feel like they weren't providing before. Sometimes it's more security seeking as well, when they feel like, they feel most secure when they're actually getting that sexual attention from their spouse. But that's pretty darn early in the game, I think, for him to be to have a willing partner and to be expecting that they can just somehow, get right back on track sexually or just, blaze a new trail. I think he's going to need to accept that he's got some work to do. He's going to need to have broad shoulders and a long view in order to really see this through.
Yeah,
well,
I agree
Yeah, you agree too, Ginger, right?
I do, and I was just going to say, just to add to that too, that as you know, Carol, it would probably be really helpful for him as part of kind of the psychoeducational part, really helping him to bring sex, down to size again. Because as you know, when, people are acting out sexually, it becomes such a big part of their secret life. And, they think it's their absolute biggest need. And really helping them to see that, part of recovery is having sex that they will actually feel good about, and it can be connecting, and, that it does take a while for partners to feel safe enough to be sexual again, and helping him to see that sex can't be the whole picture, but it will be a part of the picture, and really make it fit more into the relationship as opposed to being such a big part of it.
Well, absolutely. And, what I believe to be true is in some ways this is probably his reaching out to have some closeness so that he can begin to feel secure, like he has not ruined things forever. And so asking him to be patient is so important. And that's, I get that this book, the book that you've written, From the Living Room to the Bedroom, The Modern Couple's Guide to Sexual Abundance and Lasting Intimacy, it has some really helpful hints. I mean, you talk about things like sexual abundance, and although he's not ready for sexual abundance, he's really ready for those communicative exercises to bring his wife closer and to let her know that he cares about her, he wants to know what she's thinking, and he wants her to know what he's thinking. Now, right. I'm gonna ask you, because in this book's subtitle there is that phrase, sexual abundance, and that is the goal of the book and for all couples. So talk a little bit about what sexual abundance is, especially for our recovering couples that have been doing this for a while. They're in recovery, and, they're living that normal life, but they still don't have abundance.
Yeah, we look at abundance, generally speaking, it's characterized by knowing that you have enough of what you want, have enough of what you need, and finding satisfaction even as you continue to try and improve. That process typically breeds gratitude. And as we all know, gratitude is such a tremendous force that really reinforces the whole abundant approach to living. So we're trying to take that same abundant lifestyle approach in general and have it follow into the bedroom. So that's what happens with sexual abundance. One distinction we make is it's not to be confused with sexual excess, but instead it's really it's the natural result of your sexual intimacy being in alignment with your emotional connection. So it's an intimacy-based, renewable, and energized sexual connection.
Okay.
And again, it's really the result of an intentional approach. That's what's going to get any couple there, is by having a plan and sticking to it, and hopefully having a lot of fun and learning a lot as they go.
Well, yeah, and your book breaks it down into step-by-step advice as to how you can develop more and more intimacy. As a matter of fact, you even have a sexual preference survey that's really important for couples to take. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So this is a checklist, or not a checklist, that's in our book where couples can rate, each of these different activities, either not for them, not one of their favorites, would like it, let's try it, definitely like it, and can't get enough. So the whole purpose behind this exercise, Carol, is really to help couples talk about their sexual behavior together and talk about their sexual preferences. I'm sure as you've seen with couples as well, for as much as they want a better sex life, it can be so hard for couples to talk about what they like sexually with each other. Mm-hmm. There's still so much embarrassment around that or guilty feelings about that. And so this is really hopefully an easy way for couples to just kind of characterize or categorize each of these activities and then to share them with their partner. So that way, it really opens the door to communicating what they'd like more of and what they'd be open to trying.
We see a lot of couples are relieved, I think, when they see this. When we're working with a couple and we ask them to do the sexual preferences survey as part of their homework for any given week. Usually there's a lot of, I would say, excitement mixed with anxiety and relief also, because they didn't have to initiate the conversation. They didn't have to come up with the specific items that they would like more information about. I wonder how she really feels about this. I wonder what he really likes in this area. And it's amazing that when they come back, time and time again, it was just so enlightening. It really got us talking in ways that we just hadn't talked before. And this could be a couple that was married 35 years, and they never really talked about something that was so important, such a vital part of their relationship. Now, some couples do, okay, and there might not be any surprises when they take the sexual preferences survey. Might be kind of confirming what they already suspect or know. But I think for so many couples, there's something new that comes from getting down to specific details and really having an honest, frank, and compassionate conversation about them.
Well, you are not kidding. And if worse comes to worse, you take the book in the car with you on the road trip and just start asking the questions, because truly, like you said, it matters not how long you've been together or what you've been through. There are things that people don't talk about because they're hesitant to, they feel shame about, they're embarrassed to do. So again, how can people get from the living room to the bedroom? By Dr. Bill and Ginger Bercaw.
Oh, the easiest way is through Amazon. If you just look up the title or our names, it should come right up. And I thank you for asking about that, Carol. It's something that we really believe in. We believe in it professionally because we've seen what it's done with the couples that we've taken through the CoupleFlow program, and we believe in it personally. We've seen how it's been working very positively for us, and it's something that we're sure that we'll be using for many years to come in our own marriage.
Well, I so appreciate you being available to share this. Of course, I have a zillion other questions. We're going to have to get you back on the show. I recommend this book to all my clients. I wish you continued success for bringing up something that's very difficult to talk about. Dr. Bill and Ginger Bercaw, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol. It was great to be with you this evening.
It's always such a pleasure. You're such a pro, so thank you very much.
All right, well, we will talk again, okay?
Hey, sounds great, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. Take care.
All right, have a great week. All right, everybody, you heard it from me. From the living room to the bedroom, the modern couple's guide to sexual abundance and lasting intimacy. We have to end the show. Thanks for joining us. And as I say at the end of every show, there will only be one of you at all times. Fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. get this book and discuss the important question. We'll see you next week.